first child and wish her well for the rest of this year, and can't wait to have her back in the fall. So,
Wonderful. Anybody have any comments? I'd entertain a motion.
So move.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on to acceptance of gift from Simsbury Badminton Club.
All right, this is the first of three generous gifts this evening. This one relates to Henry James. Brian White is here, and this is, the board may recall the PTO actually donated the first one of these, and this is to continue the progress of replacing the old water fountains with the newer versions, which include a water bottle fill station. So the Simsbury Badminton Club is one of the community groups that uses the gymnasium in the evenings, so I think they felt it was a good thing to give back, and we would ask the board's approval of this gift, which is not only the fountain but also the install costs of valued at $2,704.
Anyone have any comments?
Move to approve. Oh, comments, sorry.
That's okay. You can move to approve.
I move to approve. Or
Second?
accept.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And a very large thank you. That's a wonderful addition. Well, addition for everyone, the whole community.
All right, the next gift is for Simsbury High School, this first robotics team, and we have a gift from United Technologies of $4,000, and I believe, looking at our records, this is about the 8th year that we've continued to receive corporate sponsorship, so we ask for your approval of this gift.
Any comments? Motion.
I'll move.
Second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are so lucky to have them as a community partner in this program, because the program just gets more and more fun every year when they come and tell us about what they did. We look forward to the product of that gift. Thank you.
Okay, and last but not least, for Squadron Line, the PTO has a very generous gift of a horizontal traversing wall for the school gymnasium. Principal Megan Evans is here, and we've been communicating a bit on this recently. This will obviously enhance the PE program. I don't know if you have any other comments on this process, but we have a climbing wall at Terrafil School that was donated by their PTO, and I believe this would be our second elementary school climbing area.
We're just really excited because it could be something that all students can benefit from and participate in and collaborate with, and team building and youth perseverance and grit and all of that we're talking about with our growth mindset. So we're really excited about this opportunity, and just really grateful for the PTO for all their support.
Wonderful. Anyone have any other comments? Motion?
I'll make a motion to propose gift of a traversing wall, Squadron Line School be approved.
You wanted to say that, didn't you?
I sure did. I sure did.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I see a board retreat at.
We'll definitely have to be doing a visit once that gets installed. Thank you very much. Please let us know.
Like I'm busy that day.
And Burke, now we have one more.
Aaron's got the next
Yes,
one.
I have
Wonderful.
a scholarship, a proposed scholarship to bring forward to you. It's called Best Buddies Award. And the Best Buddies Club is a club that brings together typical peers and disabled, intellectually or disabled peers or students together. And they do group activities such as going out to lunch, going bowling, going to the movies, doing a variety of different things. So they're proposing a $500 scholarship that would be done yearly, starting with this June, the class of 2018. It would be awarded to a student who participates in the unified programs that we make available to students, and that the student should exemplify acceptance and inclusion of peers with intellectual disabilities. So I would ask for your approval of this scholarship to be awarded this June to a member of the graduating class.
Sounds great. Anybody have any comments?
Yeah, the scholarship would be awarded to a student that works with,
That is, participates in the Unified Arts Program.
I see, and works with children with special needs.
Correct.
I see.
Any other questions?
I'd like to move to accept that scholarship, and that's a wonderful gesture.
I think it's wonderful, too. Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I think that is wonderful, and just icing on the cake, because they have already received enough from being in the program, so that's just great. Moving on to approval of 6-year capital improvement plan.
You going to do one slide or not?
So absolutely, I'm on it.
So the board has seen multiple.
Got it.
The board has seen multiple iterations of our plan going back to the fall, and I believe this fourth version you have in your packets. We just have highlighted the first year here, which is the year that would actually be potentially able to be voted on once the process, the town process has been finished. So just wanted to give a brief update on the Henry James Phase 3 project. We have the updated cost estimate that we've reviewed previously, but I did want to give some positive news from the meeting that we had last week at the state with our architects and the state construction grant folks. We did want to verify, based on any changes that might have taken place in their process, that we were still eligible and what our reimbursement rate would likely be, and came away. In fact, today I got information from our architects that calculated that the estimated reimbursement would actually be higher than the conservative number that we've been using. So the amount would actually be closer to about 5.7 million. We have a little over 5 million in that plan, which shows the offset. So the net cost is offset by grant, but we still look at the total project cost, and we always vote the total cost. So that was one update on Henry James. Also wanted to just highlight, and you have a summary in your packets for your binders, that at the workshop meeting, we put a specific dollar amount on the building maintenance improvement project for all 7 schools, as well as the school security improvements. And just as a reminder, we've just recently finished the prior capital monies for school security projects, and so this would allow us to do upgrades to our exterior locks and software for all of our schools. It would be allowing us to do some added security cameras, and also some interior locks. So we have, something that would help each of our schools here. So if there are any other questions about any of these projects that would potentially be before the voters, we'd like to give you a chance to ask questions. But Matt, did you have a comment?
No, I would just say in terms of the overall process, we met with the town briefly today. I know that they were meeting on some of their capital projects, having an initial meeting, and we still do need to go through that kind of annual meeting and exercise of how do all of the project requests right now fit within that either 6.7% or 7% debt line. So we know we're outside of that a little bit. We know we have some collaborative conversations we have to have with the town, and we are getting started a little bit later, to no fault of anybody's. Maria's just transitioning in, and we need time to get her familiar with the process and start to have those conversations. But in terms of our timeline, our responsibility is to vote and move forward our capital plan tonight.
We've talked about this many meetings. How does everyone feel? Does everyone feel satisfied with all the questions they've asked previous? Do they have any more questions for tonight?
Because of what you just said, it's really hard to have any questions because the preparation has been really superb. And I have no questions at all. They've all been answered.
Great, then I would entertain a motion.
I would move, do we have a specially worded motion or not?
Here, Todd will do it.
I'll move that the Board of Education 6-year capital improvement plan for the period of 2019 to 2024 be.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good work for us.
Yeah, thank you for all your work, Burke, and making it easy for us to understand. We really, really appreciate it.
Point of order, just another question on here, on slide number 2. You have here under Henry James renovation, you have 22,965,620. On slide number 3, architectural conceptual cost 23,965. That's correct, right?
You are correct that the
Or it's not?
the prior pre-inflation number is what's shown there. So that's a mistake on that, on the slide here also, and on the
But what we
exhibit.
voted on was.
Everything
the
on
correct
this
number.
plan was indicated correctly as 23,965, 520. Thank you, Lydia.
So it's 20.
So it's 23.
It's 23, right.
Right.
That was the number that was revised.
So we voted on
So
the 20.
we voted on the
Yes, the
23.
plan
Are
itself.
we all clear on that?
The actual detailed plan of all 6 years is what you were making your motion on. We were highlighting for tonight any questions on the first year.
The schedule has the right.
The schedules has the correct number.
Get that far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We all still in favor? Ayes. All right, moving on to our budget.
Right. Thank you very much. So I am excited tonight to get an opportunity to kind of work through the culmination of the budget process, the way we structure things. We started in November. I just wanted to revisit the process a little. We started in November with that 3-board meeting that we've talked about, where we looked at various contextual factors. The Board of Finance provided a expenditure cap to us this year in lieu of all that had gone on last year in uncertainty in state aid. And I think that really assisted us in guiding the process. So before I get into the presentation, I want to thank my team a little bit, both the people at the table and the principals behind the table, because they've always been very involved in the budget process, but as we get into it, we shifted things in our process a little bit this year to get a much deeper level of understanding of certain things, ask for a higher level of scrutiny in certain areas, and I think what it has produced is a budget that meets the target that the Board of Finance established, but also moves the district forward. And that's the most important thing in our eyes, and I know in the eyes of board members. So I want to thank what I feel is the best team out there, both my central office team and the principals that came out to support tonight. So thank you very much. So to get started, those are the hard numbers of the budget we're moving forward. $69 million, a little over $300,000. Which is an overall increase of $1.1 million, or a 1.75% increase over last year's spending and operating costs. So 3 different pieces we're going to cover tonight, and I know it's a format we've used before and we're pretty familiar with. We'll talk a little bit more about context. I think it's always important for people to understand the different factors and rationale of how we got to where we're going, so I'll spend a little bit of time on that. Return on investment, I know, is important both to our board, for the general public, for our students and families and staff to know, hey, at the end of the day, how are we doing? So I know in our process, each and every year at the beginning of the year, we have our high school come out, our middle school principal come out, our elementary representatives, and really talk about our continuous improvement planning. So I've just pulled some different snapshots of celebratory information to show that our return on investment is high and we should feel good about the direction we're moving in the future. And then the last piece is the hard numbers, how we got to the eventual 1.75 from fixed costs to some of the operational efficiencies that we found as we built our budget. So every year we look for a little bit of a theme to try to frame what we're doing, and I think really balancing the new fiscal reality with educational excellence and moving forward our goals is something important for us to consider. So kind of 2 parts to the slide, and I'm not going to read each and every one of these bullets, but we know about the economic challenges that are framing the fiscal climate. We know and have had conversation about uncertainty in state aid, right? There were conversations last year that we were going to lose all $6 million of our state aid, and we kind of planned accordingly with contingency. In the end, we were fortunate that that did not happen. So not only is it uncertain, the scenarios that we receive for planning are wild swings. which makes it even more challenging for everybody. Local mill rate challenges that the Board of Finance has talked about and that we know we're cognizant of. We have a relatively high mill rate when we look at other communities, and we know they've set goals, and we've tried to get there in recent years of how we can either keep that mill rate flat or create a minimal increase. The expenditure cap certainly was a driving factor this year in the budget outcome, and declining enrollment is something that we talk about quite a bit at the district level. More importantly, what does this budget support? What can we feel good about as you consider this budget to move forward and approve? One, it protects our excellent academic programming options for our students. We should feel really good about. Two, it reestablishes planning and staffing within our class size guidelines. I know this board is aware. Neil has kept us up to date in several instances this year where, particularly at the primary level, we have large class sizes, 25 students in a kindergarten class, 24 students in other kindergarten classes. We weren't able this year with summer in-migration to feel comfortable adding sections like we had in other years, so we've made adjustments as we move through, but as we've planned and roll forward with the FTE at this point in time, we'll have to continue to watch things, but we're planned within class size guidelines. We're requesting additional resources in some areas. You can see there, social and emotional support and math that we'll talk about. We'll continue to move forward the great work of technology in our district, professional development, and then this budget allows us, even though there is pretty significant reduction of staffing levels that we'll get into, we're going to retain our talented staff. Nobody is losing a job. And, when we talk about the foundation of our district being really talented kids, exceptional staff and supportive parents, keeping our best teachers with us is a really, really important thing to consider. So just a little of the historical information you can see from 2014 to last year, what the superintendent's budget presentation looked like and what the actual increase ended up being as it went through. In certain, some years it's the same. Some we have some consistent changes. A lot of that movement in 15, 16, and 16, 17 was due to insurance favorability. We were able to lower. It wasn't necessarily reductions put upon us. Those were decisions we came back and made as a board in conjunction with the Board of Finance. Last year was a little bit different. We moved forward a budget of 2.48. The bottom fell out a bit. We were put in position, as well was the Board of Selectmen, to respond to that, and we ended up with an increase of 0.99. Little historical information there you can see. 10-year average of under 2. Mike, I know you've referenced that for some time, and a 5-year average a bit lower than that. In 3 of the last 4 years, able to really support everybody and get to our collective, the collective goals that were established. So some good historical information, I think, that frames where we are. Per pupil expenditure information, this is always data we look on an annual basis. A quick snapshot relative to our DIRG, we're a little below the average. We're significantly below the state comparative. So this is a statistic that we've held relatively stable, up or down a few positions over the course of the past couple years. It is a statistic that gets impacted pretty considerable if you have a decline in enrollment. But a statistic where I believe we're holding our own, and for the programs and product that we provide to be around the DIRG average, I think is a solid thing for us to reference. Enrollment, I know Neil has talked about historical enrollment, historical FTE. I'm not going to do that as part of this presentation, but I'm going to show you a 2-year snapshot of where it's been. So we are projected to go down next year in our planning, only about 43 students. So it's stabilized quite a bit for this year. Basically flat at the elementary level, basically flat, a little bit up at the high school level, a little bit of a dip at the middle school level, but it will go up a year after that. So a 2-year reduction of a little over 100 students, and a 2-year reduction inclusive of what we present today of almost 18 and a half full-time equivalent positions, which is about $1.2 million in realized savings and reductions that we've made in response to either the budget scenario or our decline in enrollment. So things we did different, and Neil referenced this a while ago, so I recap it. It's what I wanted to give the principals credit for, and certainly a little bit different exercise. We talked about it at our budget workshop last week. We asked principals to come forward and really look at various reduction scenarios to help us prioritize different things that we could talk about and make decisions on. That's not easy to do. That's not something we've had to do as much in the past. I think it gave us a greater appreciation for some of the programs that we have in place. I think it definitely, I don't want to speak for the principals, helped them to better understand the resources, both certified and non-certified, that were in their buildings. And it helped to guide some decisions we were making. We're fortunate enough this year to really focus a strategy on capturing the full value of retired positions that sit outside teacher classroom positions. Our enrollment doesn't allow us a lot of flexibility this year in making reductions due to class size, so we had to find the reductions in different places, and the conversations with the principals really helped to drive that. So the net result of that, and we'll get into specifics later, is net savings of 6 full-time equivalent positions of approximately $500,000. Some non-personnel changes. We really looked at some zero-based budget exercises in some major accounts, a little different than we've done in the past, and asked people, building leaders, to consider what a 20% reduction would look like in those areas. We did not end up taking the full 20% reduction at all, but the exercise allowed us to gauge full impact of what things would be, and we came up with a collective reasoning of $221,000 of additional savings in those accounts. So that's from a process shift, a process that I think was truly valuable. But I want to highlight, too, because we did make quite a bit of movement from our fixed costs, as you'll see momentarily, to the 1.75% increase. All right, so this is the fun part. You get to take a look real quick, and Aaron spruced this up. You know, I didn't have that fancy little sparkles, but Aaron says, you know, Matt, you have to put a little fun into it. So,
We earned it.
You know, they work with me on these things. They work with me. But return on investment is high, and while we are a district that focuses on continuous improvement and has distinct areas that we've targeted for improvement, the representative sample up there demonstrates across all areas of the organization we have things to celebrate. So I'm just going to highlight a few. The top one I'd like to denote, because you're not as familiar with that right now. This information just came out from the state of Connecticut as part of their accountability index. And we have 3 of our elementary schools that are being held in the regard of schools of distinction. That's the highest level that they can be rated. And it goes well beyond test scores. And that's what you'll see with some of these bullets here. This is some of the achievement gap work we've talked about. There's attendance data in there. There's physical education data in there. These are a full matrix of different components that make up a school rating system that the state put in just a couple years ago, that we're going to come forward and talk to you and share information about how our schools did. But we did exceptionally well this year. In addition to those 3 schools, the high school has an overall index rating that is the 3rd highest in the entire state of Connecticut. So a lot of great things that we'll bring forward to you.
What was that last one
shortly.
about the 3rd highest in the state? Index rating?
It's an index rating. It's a cumulative rating that the school gets, and I don't know, is it 10 to, I don't know how many, it's 10 to 15 or so.
12 categories.
12 categories, including achievement gap work, chronic attendance. I mean, there's a lot of different factors in there.
Okay.
Test scores, access to the arts. So we'll bring that forward to you. This information was just released, so it's going to be part of an upcoming presentation. But a lot of really great data to demonstrate that we're looking at performance differently. You know, it's not just the SAT score. Math implementation has gone well this year. We've talked a lot about that. We've received honors for our arts program, our music programs, our athletic programs. So just a demonstration that we have a lot of different things to feel good about in our school system and an opportunity to promote it, because these are things that we need to continue to focus on as we analyze where we're focusing our resources. I put this slide up. I know, Meg, you mentioned before a little bit about some of the things we're working on with kids and mindset and perseverance and grit. That there's a whole other side of the work we do beyond the academic performance side, and that's developing the character ed and the cultures of each of our schools. So each school has marketed their identity in a different way, and I know they're extremely proud in what those things are. So whether it's, you know, Squadron Line with how they shine in respect and responsibility, or the high school mission-driven work of preparation, passion, and personal growth. We spend a lot of time in thinking about the whole child and the different parts of development and what we can do to support those kids. And those programs are as important as the academic programs that exist in our school system. So a couple other data points to share. U.S. News and World Report analyzes high school performance on an annual basis. We have become a regular in the top 10 on this list. It varies a little bit year to year, but wanted to share that as well, as I think that's a highlighted public marker that brings credibility again to the kind of the performance and achievement of our high school. The other piece we've talked about before, personalized learning opportunities for kids. You know, we're starting to talk a little bit, and I sense the level of interest from our Board of Education about the vision of the graduate. One of those elements is, are we personalized opportunities for kids? I feel like we've been ahead of that curve a little bit. Neil led that work at Simsbury High School in creating some of these elective opportunities and learning clusters for kids where you have multiple opportunities to take courses in an area of interest. They've been extremely, extremely successful. I've said time and time again, as enrollment goes down at Simsbury High School, we're going to have to continue to look at these areas because they're of such great value to kids. And this is something that truly separates, Aaron and I talk about it all the time, separates our high school from other high schools, is the depth and number of opportunities that we allot our kids. So it's something to celebrate, something to put out there and talk about during budget season for sure. Selected some of the high school data points because it's the culminating experience for kids. And you can see on just about any measure, these are the state accountability measures right now. This is our DIRG, that we're at the top or right near the top. So again, some things to feel good about. Definitely we continue to have areas to work on as we want to strive for improvement. But from a positional standpoint, a comparative standpoint, I think it's important for people to understand our kids are doing extremely well. And that's something to celebrate.
How many districts in the dirt?
I didn't list them all because the slide got busy. It's about
Right.
20.
Oh, okay.
About 20. Yep.
So some of
This
these
is the
schools
top.
Some of these schools have big swings and difference.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
This is great. It's just-
it is very helpful.
Murray killing us on
All right. So now we take a look at the hard numbers to make sure we all have a real good understanding of what our fixed costs are and some of the different ways we move that number to 1.75. So these are the four areas we're really going to touch on. We have our contractual obligations, special education, insurance, pension, program improvements, and then I'll work through the different ways we found cost savings. So the largest driver certainly is our contractual obligations. We've said time and time again, we're a people-driven business. So almost 80% of our costs in the end are going to be salary and going to be benefits. So this is a snapshot of what the fixed costs of our contracts look like. It also demonstrates some of the challenge of how it would take to take your fixed cost number and eventually get to a 175, because you can see with our teachers contract, admitted contract, and the other contracts we have, we're already at a fixed cost of over 2%. So that gives you a good snapshot. Certainly the teacher's contract, due to numbers, the largest variable in this, with a little bit over $1 million increase. Special education is a main driver in the sense that it makes up a large portion of our budget, but is not a main driver this year in terms of an increase. So it's a year where Sue has done a good job, and I think we've certainly managed some of those more volatile areas of out-of-district tuition and transportation. We've just gotten a better handle, I think, on tracking that information, reporting out on that information, and making the best decisions. But we have started to talk about, at the suggestion of the board a couple years ago, special education as more of a program-based look. And this is a snapshot into the realization that it's about 22% of our operating costs. For next year's budget, the main components, salary and benefits, in those areas that we've talked quite a bit about, out-of-district tuition, transportation, and then purchase services and supplies, which is kind of contracted services and consults. The second most significant driver to the budget is the insurance and pension. So we have a little bit of historical information. You can take a look at the comparative 16-17 to 17 and 18. Most importantly, I think, is the line down below, the projected 2018-19 cost for insurance and pension at an increase of $700,000 or a little bit over 1%. Now, just to be clear, when we talk about insurance and we talk about pension, I know with so much conversation about pension last year and where the pension liability would sit, this is not teacher pension. I just want to be clear on that. The teacher pension benefit and burden sits with the state of Connecticut. These are our own pension plans for our unaffiliated and union workers outside of the administrative and outside of the teacher bargaining group. So 2 program improvements that we've really advocated for and that we feel pretty good about. You know, I think we've done a very effective job with the guidance of the board on reallocating certain dollars to ensure that we meet needs that are identified at the building level and at the district level. So we have in here 2 full time equivalent positions that we'd like to add. One is an additional elementary math coach, which we've talked about, that will allow us to go to a building-based model. Several years ago now, we had a building-based model. I was familiar with the building-based model when I was a principal of Squadron Line School. The opportunity for those coaches to foster those relationships at even a higher level because you're there. Everybody knows you are there. You'll have a better handle on the intervention programs. You'll have a more effective relationship with the principal is a model that we're seeking to go back to in lieu of the major transition that we're in. So this was a priority certainly articulated by the people in the room and one that I know the board has fully supported. The second is an additional social worker. This was an FTE we had in there last year. Unfortunately, with all the movement, we weren't able to move forward with it. We've really seen the increased value of this position in the addition that we had a couple years ago. This will allow us to go to a 3 to 5 ratio with our elementary schools, but it will also benefit the secondary level because it will allow Gertrude Banks, who is our open choice specialist, the grant-funded position, rather than to be spread across 7 schools now, to focus on both the middle school and high school level. So it's that one FTE really is going to give you impact at both levels. So I know that we're extremely supportive of that at a total cost estimate of $175,000, an increase again of 2 full-time equivalent positions.
Yeah, just for perspective on the elementary math coach, we've had a lot of discussion about that in the last 2 years. With this addition, does that complete the cadre of math coaches? Do we have the team formed that we want, or do we still have a shortfall there?
Yeah, we pretty much have the team form. I think it'll take us 1 year to really take a look at, analyze that, because one of the positions also has some responsibilities for elementary science. But we're getting close. I think I'll be able to better answer that question when we get into the work. We will have definite an allocated individual to each building. It won't be a full-time individual. So really to take a look now at the operational efficiencies and how we're moving that fixed number downward to get to that 1.75 cap. So again, that strategy of looking at the retired positions and capturing the full value. There are 4 positions that we've discussed in great detail starting in Neil's presentation that give us that value of $436,000. The second piece or line item there is the differential in normal retirements. These are retirements that we will replace. As I want to make clear, our decline of only 43 students this year does not allow us to squeeze significant FTE or any FTE for that matter at the elementary or the middle level that we see at this point. So these are positions that need to be replaced, classroom positions. It's the differential between the high salary going out and an average of hiring a new person that may be at a middle level salary. So we estimate, I think it's $25,000 a piece for that in a total of $150,000. We talked about the fact we will have 1 additional certified staff reduction. We've already had a couple retirements come in that we'll take a look at. We do know that Simsbury High School has to go through their class registration process that they do in the next week or so. So this may be a review of a myriad of things to come up with 1 FTE. It may be shaving of positions, a 0.2 from here, a 0.2 from there. But in our conversations with our principals and knowing how we staff on an annual basis, we do know we'll be able to do this without impacting program in a negative way. We've also looked on the non-certified staff. From the conversations we had from principals coming in, we've already had some movement. I mean, we're not ready to talk about it publicly, certainly with retirements and everything else. We need a little more time to analyze how that all shakes out. But a reduction of 3 positions on the non-certified side. So you're looking at the categories of paraprofessionals, secretarial, staff of various responsibilities, and reallocating some of that need in some of those responsibilities in different ways, and doing some things differently. Burke did a really good job in our electricity bid to find some cost savings of $80,000. And then that last line item of $221,000 is made up of that zero-based budgeting concept that I talked about before. So in total, you can see reductions pretty significant of over $1 million, or 1.69%. So here's the big roll-up. All right, so this is the format over time that we take a look at, that puts it all in one place. Try to create it simple so you can get a snapshot of how the dollars work. So you're taking a very complex line item budget and trying to boil it down to just some broad categories. But essentially the top portion of this, the additions, are the contracts we just covered, the 2 certified positional requests that we covered, the health insurance estimate that we covered, that's pretty significant, and some smaller items. One of them is the potential for the non-lapsing cliff. I'll talk about that in an additional slide, but we've really minimized what we think that potential impact would be. But in essence, you can see that the total roll-up is 3.47%. So if you take those 2 new requests out, your fixed costs are over 3.2%. So that movement to get to 1.75 did take some considerable work, as I know you're aware. Those are the reductions that you see below. We just went through all of them, and you net that out, and that is your 1.75% increase overall. So grants and revenues. How grants and revenues interplay with our operating budget has been something we've talked more and more about in recent years. It's something that we try to strategically take advantage to reduce our operating burden. The open choice grant, as we reached 4% of enrollment with our open choice students last year, we received increased funding. When we received that increased funding, we moved $400,000 from our operating budget in equipment onto that grant. I think it was a wise strategy. Equipment is something we zero-based budget every year, and we can keep an eye on in that way. It's not personnel related, so I felt comfortable with that movement. We're going to utilize the grant for that same purpose this year, so I just wanted to put that out there. I know that we talked about that when we went through the line item detail in the workshop. We've also received a higher than anticipated revenue stream for the excess cost grant. That's going to give us a greater deal of flexibility in how we look at the non-lapsing funding. So additionally, we thought we were going to have to utilize $340,000 in non-lapsing funding. We do not believe we will have to use the majority of that funding, which, as we work our way down the road, we talked about in the workshop that we'll have some decisions to make with ourselves and the Board of Finance. But some of this positive information has helped us in the area of potentially freeing up some dollars, either for next year to offset potential special education, or if there's a need we need to talk about this year in collaboration with the Board of Finance, we'll be able to do that as well.
Could I just ask a question about that?
Yes.
Please, Matt. I'm always interested in reserves for contingencies. I mean, every budget I've ever been associated with, we're very open about it. We put reserves for contingencies into our budgets, and I'm just wondering how are we handling the possibility of needing extra funds for contingencies, is that in the non-lapsing account? Is that where our reserves are?
So the non-lapsing is one of the areas that we have looked at to that.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility, and we've done this collectively. We have to identify what we think we will use those funds for. So we have never just budgeted, I don't want to call it a luxury, with the luxury of having a contingency fund. Normally, we will look, if we have an issue, I can go back to several years ago, my first or second year as superintendent, we really did have quite an uptick in special education settlements and outplacements, where we had a significant shortfall mid-year that we had to report out to the board. What we chose to do was manage that internally and try to juggle between accounts, find some savings in certain accounts. But that was the year, Tom, that we went to the Board of Finance and requested the creation of the non-lapsing account, because that was a significant strain and a significant challenge. They were pretty cooperative in understanding that that fund would allow us an opportunity to respond to unforeseen expenses in an area such as special education or another area. So it can serve in that capacity, but we need to be very transparent about how we talk about what we want to use those dollars for.
So we can't use them for contingencies, unexpected events, because we haven't identified them, so we can't say.
Well, what we could do, if we come to the end of the year and we didn't expend those funds, we can have a conversation, or at some point in the year, we can have a conversation with our board or the Board of Finance to say, we originally had the non-lapsing, for example, earmarked for special education. We have a major issue in this other area. We would like to utilize the funding for that. Is everybody okay with it?
Okay, I get it.
We have the ability to do that.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone have any other questions?
Oh, I'm sorry, I do have one other, and that's the health insurance preliminary estimate. That's a pretty big number. Maybe I missed the meeting when we
Yeah.
talked about that, but how firm is that estimate?
I mean, there's some unknown factors in terms of our planning moving forward for what I think we need for an operating number. I don't believe it's going to get better. So it's firm in that sense. This is a number I brought to the Board of Finance very early in conversation. Our ability to offset the size of that increase is a little bit hindered right now because of the balance of our internal service fund. So I had talked at the three-board meeting to the Board of Finance that a way that there could be potential more operating relief if needed would be to supplement that internal service fund if they're in a healthy reserve situation and allow us to curb that a little bit. Meaning if they put, we had recommended potentially looking at a $700,000 to $1 million, I believe, and this is upstairs, downstairs too. This is both us and the Board of Selectmen. Look at an infusion of funds back into that internal service fund from reserves. You can use that reserve money to offset that increase.
Okay, so if the 700 that's in this budget is not adequate, you got it covered with these other moves in the...
Well, I think this will be adequate. I believe it will be adequate. The question is, would an infusion into the internal service fund allow you to come down on that number or not?
Okay.
All right, but I think the number is adequate on the ceiling level.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, so the second piece of this that we don't talk about as much, certainly, it's because of the size and the scope of it, is the non-public school budget, which you'll also be voting on next week. So it's a little bit over a $500,000 line item. And what this encompasses is our relationship really with the private schools in town. Okay, so we provide nursing services to several of those schools by statute, and transportation costs in lieu of busing. We do bus St. Mary's, but in lieu of that, mileage reimbursement if your school meets certain demographics in terms of town residents. So there's some field maintenance dollars in there as well, but those are the three main categories that make up the non-public. You can see that it's going to go down a little bit this year. The reason it's going to go down is that from time to time, one or two of the private schools will come on the rolls and off the rolls based on what their demographic is in terms of Simsbury residents attending those schools, on whether they're eligible or not for the reimbursement. So we had one of the schools come off, and that's why you see the smaller decline.
Different towns, they have pro rata funding based on the number of students from the town.
Right, so I believe the equation is for us to pay mileage reimbursement, the school has to have 50% Simsbury kids in it, the school that's here. So like a Westminster, for example, would have to be made up of 50% of Simsbury residents, and then we'd be responsible for the Simsbury kids mileage. All right? Kind of a funky legislative thing that not that many people are aware of, and we are right in the midst of a hotbed of private schools. So, but not a significant play, certainly, in the overall budget development process. So the last piece is just some of the key next steps, and then I'll take any questions that folks have. So our next board meeting is the 27th, where we would vote on the operating budget. We are scheduled to go before the Board of Finance to present some of the operating budget, and at that meeting, I'd certainly like to have some detailed capital conversation with them as well on March 13th. And then we have the public hearing on April 5th, which will be here before you know it. So that really is kind of the wrap of the first leg of our budget process. And I think, I feel pretty good about the fact that we've provided you the information and components along the way. You've had an opportunity to see and vet all the line item detail, ask questions about that at the workshop. But we can certainly respond to any questions that people have tonight. We want you to be comfortable or get those questions to me before we have to vote on this, and we can respond to them in the next public session.
Anyone have any other questions? Thoughts?
Couple of comments. First of all, thanks to everybody involved. I think the work was terrific, as usual. I know Matt kind of pulls it all together and does a presentation, but it's all the folks here who do all the groundwork and bring it to this point. So thanks. I think our process gets a little better every year, a little tighter and a little more informative, which is great. On Tom's question about insurance, I'd point out that in the last several rounds of negotiations, we've been pleased that both the administrators and the teachers groups have really worked alongside of us and collaboratively to try to come up with programs that allow us to have better containment, I guess I would say. And I think it's paying off,
Absolutely.
Given what I see out there in the market in terms of increases in healthcare costs, to have a number like that is terrific. It's, I hope it comes in at that level, but in any event, I think it's largely in part to our ability to sort of keep the programs are sort of up to speed, I guess, with the way you can do that and allow yourself to get better containment of those costs. So thanks to all the people that have worked with us on that. The one comment I would make, I continue to be sort of troubled with the metric of enrollment as, the per pupil expenditure, it's just a really blunt instrument. It's not a bad one, but it certainly shouldn't be the only one that we use to measure how we're doing. I've become more and more convinced, by the way, that really it's the number of classes that drives costs more than the number of students. So, and I know we've talked about this. If we had 46 kids in two classes of 23 each, and we drop 10 kids and we go down to 36 kids, we still have two classes. They're now 18, but you can't do a class of 36. So you still have two classes, which means you need two teachers and you need two classrooms and the lights on in two rooms and all that stuff. So I did a sort of quick look at the enrollment or the classes at the high school and the enrollment drop at the high school, and the number seems to track a little more closely. The drop in the number of classes was, I think, 11% over a 5-year period, and it seems like that tracks our numbers better than the enrollment does if you just looked at the enrollment numbers. And if you tie that number of classes to the number of FTEs, seems to be a closer relationship than
It's an economy of scale where you can cut it a little finer from year to year.
There's just a better relationship between that than there is FTEs and enrollment. That really doesn't tell you much. And yet we use it all the time. And I think the general population says, well, gee, our enrollment's dropped by 20%. Why haven't our costs dropped by 20%? Well, the number of classes that we do hasn't dropped by 20%. So that's
very good point.
So I think we have to look
some of those
at
metrics
that a little more carefully, and see what we can come up with in the way of metrics which sort of better describe what we're doing. The only other comment is unfortunately, I can't be here on the meeting on the 27th, I think it is. I've got to be out of town. But I wanted to be clear to my fellow members that were I here on the 27th, I would vote in favor of this budget, so.
Thank you.
Good to know. Thank you very much for sharing. Excellent points being made. Anyone have any other questions? Any thoughts? Jen?
Okay, so I'm new to the process, so maybe this is obvious to everyone else, but the 6 certified staff retirements, right?
Right.
Now, I know that is retirement, not a cut, but it is really a cut that we're not replacing those people. How is that not affecting the students or the classrooms? Or how does it affect the students in the classrooms?
So which one, take me where you are.
That's 6, I'm on the budget summary where you just said 6 certified staff retirements.
So that top one, Jen?
Yeah.
So what that top one is those actually are not cuts. So what that is, for example, Luann Kinsner is a central school teacher that's retiring.
Right.
We're going to hire a new central school teacher to replace her, and it's a difference between her salary going out and a mid-level person coming in.
Okay. So everyone that's retiring is really being replaced.
With the exception of the line item below that, which I think is your question, is those are 5 positions which are non-certified. They're certified positions, but they're non-classroom teaching positions that are not being replaced. So there will be some level of impact in reallocating resources, but it will not impact class size. It will not impact the number of sections that we have.
Okay.
One of those positions that we talked about.
4 of the 5 are retirements.
Right.
And 1 is unnamed at this point.
Right.
4 are known retirements, and 1 still has to be determined through that process at the high school as we get course enrollments.
Right. Yep.
That help? That answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Good. Thank you.
Todd, you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for all the work. I mean, the amount of material that goes into this, I know, is enormous. And it looks easy when it's just presented in summary, but I know that there's a ton of work, and I appreciate it very much. I like to look at this through the lens of, when you meet people who move to town, one of the first things they typically will say is they come to town because of the school system. And are we keeping this budget in a state where we're maintaining the quality? And I think through through our successes, you show that we are. And I'm convinced that this budget does that. And between this and the investments that we're looking to make in the middle school, I think that that's going to continue to draw people and maintain the quality. I think that this budget is very well done, and I appreciate very much everything.
Thank you, Todd.
And the amount of hours and time that
Yeah.
you've all been.
Also, I unfortunately will not be here on the 27th to vote to adopt the budget, but I would just like to thank superintendent and staff and principals for the work they've done in crafting this budget. It's very concise, it's very comprehensible, and it's also very transparent. The whole process has always been transparent. I think that's something that we on this board take pride in doing, and also to the voters out there when we talk about how we craft a budget from the beginning right up until we vote on referendum. So I do vote in favor for it. I'm not one who's going into it. And I think, alluding to what Todd and to what Mike had already said, without reiterating too much, I think it's important that the public knows that this budget going forward is the cornerstone of our school district, of our school system here on in.
Thank you very much.
One other comment, if I
Great,
may.
Tom.
And just looking at the numbers, I kind of wrote down from one of the charts, 1.05, 1.30, 1.51, 0.99, and 1.75. And that goes back, these are pretty impressive numbers. These are low numbers in an environment where there is inflation, there's no question about it. And I think it speaks well of this whole team and our superintendent in particular to maintain that those really low increases on a year-to-year basis is really impressive. So I think that's pretty good.
Excellent. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Appreciate you all being here tonight
Thank you for
everyone who
coming
doesn't
out.
know, we have all of our principals from all of our elementaries and our junior high, and we're very happy to have you all here, supporting our system and our district and our community. It's not easy. This is not an easy process, and I appreciate all the hard work that everyone has put into it. Mr. Leclerc, would you like us to put these in our budget books? Do you want us to walk us through it?
You have three tonight. One is the superintendent's budget, so you have a tab for that.
That's from the budget workshop with the
Yes. So everyone, yes, all right, those of us who missed that bit. All right, thank you very much. We'll put that in place. That said, I'm opening it up to public audience. Anyone have anything else they want to share?
To adjourn?
No, we're not, what? Just one thing. I just wanted to say, I wanted to thank Chris Kelly for being here as our liaison to the Board of Selectmen, because it's very helpful to have you here and understanding what we're going through, and appreciate that your work as well to be here. Do you have anything you'd like to share?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Our next meeting is on Tuesday, February 27th, right here. Go ahead.
Move to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you all very much. We are done.